Well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Me too. First, I have to say, you know what's funny? As I look back into my emails and I had subscribed to your list in like 2018,
Oh
I
wow.
think you were promoting B School with Marie Forleo at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Does that
That,
sound familiar?
that is hilarious. I loved B School actually really helped me early on. Anyhow, I won't go too long into it, but yeah, I probably was like I every now and then it's like, different options work for different people, but that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, I was like, God, because I had been aware of your work for a long time. And then we got connected because my friend Ashley, Low Blasting Game of Courage to Change, I saw that she was promoting an episode that you did with her. And I was like, how do you know Julie? I was like,
I love it.
hook a sister up. So she introduced us, and I'm so glad we got connected.
I love it. No, I feel like when we spoke earlier, I was like, I feel like I've known you my whole life. Like how have we not? So
We're basically the same person.
yes, very some similar things in our past. Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Listen, we're going to get into it.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised. When you were on Ashley's podcast, I was like, I didn't know Julie was one of us, so to speak.
Right.
And by that, I mean somebody that's in recovery.
Yeah.
And so, your recovery journey is, I feel like all addiction is the same, and sometimes it just manifests differently. How did addiction show up for you?
Goodness. It's a it's a good question. I'm like, my brain went to like, where do we even begin? Because I think it was like in my DNA. So like, I don't know, conception maybe.
Family
I
history, perhaps.
maybe family history. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I'll say this, I grew up with addiction, both parents, not with alcohol, but with food and with my dad with debting and financial money issues. And so that, food is love was like a big thing. And then, i- if you don't have the money to pay for something, getting a huge cake instead of like, four of us, my younger sister, me, my mom, and my dad, we would have like enough food for an army. I think that was my dad's way of really expressing love and be able to kind of to do his version of the spoiling us. But the issue is I really caught on to these behaviors of stuffing down emotions, just stuffing it down with food, stuffing it down with sugar and chocolate. And I just remember, I mean, one of my first memories is nursery school. My dad took me to Dunkin' Donuts. I'm from Boston. It started there. We went and got a donut. I think I had like 3 donuts at like 4. And it was
Wow.
like the best day of my life. Like it was a chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. I mean, I still remember it, like holding my stuffed
Wow.
animal. I had like all these donuts. My dad, who's, kind of like my best buddy, best friend. And so as, life continued and I just really didn't learn how to handle emotions, like how to feel feelings, none of that. There wasn't much of that in my house. There was, my parents were very loving. It's just there was no processing of feelings ever really, other than like extreme anger and grief, like my mom and anxiety, or just complete not talking about anything and everything was being hidden. So I turned to food and it was debilitating it for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different ways. And it's one of those, it was like a nasty, like my little secret that I felt so shame. I had so much shame. And people had no idea because I smile a lot and you can't tell sometimes. You can't tell, what
Mm-mm.
is going on with somebody. And
Yeah.
it took me all the way to my first marriage where yeah, I can say more, but I really had I'll just say like a come to Jesus moment. I was like, I am not okay here. Like I am now at a point where I just can't stop and I don't want to live. And I
Oh,
just didn't know what to do. And
yeah.
it's a gnarly thing, especially with food. You got to eat 3 times a day at least, maybe more. And
Yeah.
you can't, this is a weird, and my sister's very out and about her recovery. She has been sober for many years and I know I've talked about it with her and others. It's like part of me was so envious that it sounds so weird, but I'm like, why couldn't I be an alcoholic? Like you don't have to drink. I know that's like I know from very close friends, no one's thinking like, yay, I'm an alcoholic. Like I don't have to drink. I mean, it's not easy. It's just with food, it's a different form of addiction because you literally, they say it's like taking the tiger out of the cage 3 times a day. Um,
Brutal.
so there's that. And I think for me, the relationship around money, it's something we can talk about, was wonky, to say at least. And yeah, definitely some interesting behaviors around that. It's kind of like, the game of whack-a-mole. When you start working on one, the other one pops up. And so but I am grateful because, there's been a lot of healing and recovery too, but it's been a long time, probably
Yeah,
in.
and listen, I really understand what you're saying when you talk about, it would have been easier to be an alcoholic in the sense that it's pretty black and white.
Yeah,
Like with alcoholism, you stop drinking. This isn't,
yeah,
really moderation really isn't a thing for somebody that has
yeah.
a true addiction. So it would be easier. Like I've often thought, yeah, that would be really hard if food was your addiction to then, have to try to moderate because that's what it sounds like that you have to do. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think it's what I can say about with food or sugar addiction, and there's a spectrum of what people consider
Right.
abstinent. Even that, it's like, there are some that no flour, no sugar, hands down. I've done that. For me, actually, having had a health situation about 12 years ago, around my thyroid, I was studying, getting a master's degree in health and wellness coaching. I was learning about integrative nutrition. I had almost like a certificate in that as well. And as I'm learning, like, oh, all these foods that are inflammatory, it was so interesting because what would have seemed really restrictive before, it shifted because it came from this place of, I really just want to be healthy and take care of myself. And so that has led me to a whole new, like, what I define for me as the lifestyle that works to support my body.
Right.
I still notice there's some of those gray areas. I have a very dear friend who's written a lot of books about food addiction. And I was like, I'm still struggling with stevia because it's not sugar, but I like something a little sweet. And so I've gone back and forth, and I've just decided, give myself grace. Like, for the most part, the things that really are addictive for me, like I don't do sugar, and I don't do dairy or gluten just because those don't work for my body. But the no sugar thing, that's a miracle. That is a flipping miracle for
I
someone
hear
like
you.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A sugar addiction is something I had, oh shoot, now I can't remember his last name, Mike. He has programs around sugar addiction. I've had Susan Pierce,
Oh,
uh,
Thompson.
Thompson, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so interesting. The sugar is rough. I have been on and off sugar for it's taking the tiger out every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
That one's a tough one too.
Yeah. And you know what? Like normal, I'm married to a normal person, human being who like has one square of chocolate. He has your, get this, he has like a half a glass of wine and one square of chocolate some nights, not every night, but most. And he'll like,
Once.
yeah, he'll just do like a little bit of like not even a half a glass of wine. He can take it or leave it. That to me is a little less of my, trigger point, but I don't drink.
You
Most
decided to be abstinent with alcohol as well?
Mainly because of sugar, honestly. It's high blood
Yeah. Oh,
sugar,
okay.
and it's not great for my thyroid and health. So it's like,
Right.
I once a year, twice a year, I might have a drink, and I could have one, and I really could care less. So that I get is,
That's not your thing.
it's not my thing, but the chocolate, I'm like, you're gonna have one square. My thought of even thinking of one square, I'm like, I can't even think about it because the minute I think of one, I'm like, no, then I would have another, then I would have another. And this is
Yeah.
what has happened. Even those bars with stevia, I like end up eating the whole bar. I have never done half of a bar. It doesn't roll with me. It doesn't work.
Yeah. I heard somewhere recently that, our neural pathways are developed in childhood and we repurpose those same neural pathways as adults. So if you have a, if you're conditioned in a certain way, if you have this pattern, it's going to, carry over into adulthood. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. It's like a kink in the hose. It's
Yeah.
like it will always be kinked in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're all
Yep.
kinky a little bit different.
We're all a little different looking. I love that. Yes. Yes. I mean, for me, the acceptance of that kink there, that's taken time. And I'm also there's a lot of gratitude because I know the feeling of all I can think about is, when I was married, my first marriage, I actually did a TEDx talk about this. I literally used to get bags of frozen chocolate chip cookies. My former mother-in-law would make like bags and bags, like 200 at a time. She's a big family. They have a big family. And I would take a bag and go in the bathroom during these big family dinners. And I would just like almost break my teeth and I would eat these. They were really amazing, I must say. But like that's what I would be thinking about. Like, how can I get that? How can I get the cookies? How can I get them I mean, it's like a criminal mind a little. I mean, I hate to
Yeah.
say it, but it's
It's all
like,
sneaky.
sneaky, where do I get the cookies? Where do I find the chocolate? Where do I and to not have that going on today, that is really a gift. Huge.
So what transition do you like you went through a 12-step process. What did you have a story that was like this is was it the bag I think I read somewhere 2 pounds of M&Ms and 15 was that your bottom or
Oh my God. Yeah, it- there were definitely many binges for me and I would use exercise and, I was always active growing up. So I would just overly exercise. That was sort of my
binge?
really disordered way of eating and dealing with it. I was working for a nonprofit. I just was so miserable there. And I also had a great I could have gotten a master's degree in people pleasing. Like, I would not want anyone to think I was upset, and I didn't want myself to be upset. Like, I just thought, "Okay, it's what probably is now, which is toxic positivity," and I have a
Mm,
tendency to be, "Let's look at the positive side." So I would just, like, slap on smiles, and then, inside, I'm like, I just did not want to be in that job anymore,
yeah.
and even though it was great work and they liked me, I was burnt out for a lot of different reasons, and I remember because they had a lot of events with food and we would get all the food, and so that was the one thing, like, it was not great for my addiction, although it was great for my addiction because I got a lot of free sugar, but I had this huge bag from Costco at the time. They used to have the bags where, like, you would seal them, and it was, I think, like a 5 or 6 pound bag, and they actually were tie-dyed. The M&Ms were tie-dyed. It was like a summer special. I don't know. I just remember this because it was sitting I had like a oh my god, this car I had was, like, super old, flimsy. I always prided myself on walking everywhere. We lived right near DC, and I loved taking the metro, and I was like, "I don't need a car," and I finally got a car, and I had the bag of M&Ms, and M's, and I'm, like, grabbing, like, just handfuls and handfuls and handfuls, like, I really couldn't stop eating them, and
Yeah.
I had remembered my mom is open about it. She was in a 12-step program when I was 10,
Oh,
for food.
wow.
Yeah. So I grew up with, like, the slogans everywhere, I was
Oh,
always
okay.
embarrassed, like, one day at a time, let go and let God on the back of my mom's, like, old Oldsmobile. I mean, it was really funny. My friends were like, "What's this one day at a time thing?" Like, what
It's
and why
magic is what it
it's
is.
yeah, it is magic, and it was, like, in sparkly, like the '80s, '90s sparkle ver yeah. And she had them all over her room. So, like, I grew up hearing this.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. I grew up with, like, Louise Hay in my ear. We used to listen to her
Wow.
tapes.
Yeah.
But I thankfully knew about this 12-step program for food, and I'd worked with a friend who was a family friend who was a therapist. I'd, like, redesigned her kitchen, and she kind of helped me with, like, what am I doing with my life? And
Mm.
I just started crying about what was going on. She's like, "I really think you should check out this food program. I think you should check it out." So I happened to have a list of the meetings, and it was in May 2003. I've talked about this before where so my brain said, you could just drive into the tree and you wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. Like, you could just end
Oh,
it, which is so sad. I know, just makes me sad. Um, and that's actually in that moment, I heard my inner guidance. I heard my inner voice say, if you go to the meeting today, your whole life will change. It's going to be
wow.
okay. Very quiet, very calm. It's actually why I do a lot with intuition because it's what really saved my life there and
Yeah.
changed it. And that was 21 years ago. I
Wow.
got to my first meeting. I was crying. I didn't know what a business meeting was, and they all ended early. And I thought they all didn't like me. Like I didn't know what was going on. And I really, I'm not active in that program today, but I will tell you for a good 15 years I was, and I had so much recovery, excavating myself. Um, I realized for me that underneath that is actually the relationships program. So people know it
Mm.
as ACA. I also did Al-Anon. And then what started to show up was a relationship with money that really was very different looking, right? You don't reach into the bag to get M&Ms, but you might reach into your wallet. Or for me, I just started to notice these behaviors of not being loving and kind to myself by not paying myself. Anyhow, so
Oh, interesting.
but that program really the food program really changed my life. I mean, I met some of my best friends. I found a sponsor that I worked with who got me into the artist's way with Julia Cameron, and that
Mm.
changed everything. Just changed my life.
Oh, you mean this book?
Oh my gosh, yes. I have it like
I
down over
keep it
here,
right.
going
Do
like
you?
that. That is awesome.
Actually, it's the second time it's come up today. I mean, that book is The Artist's Way is so amazing. Julia Cameron did 12 steps and
Yeah.
she wrote this book, The Artist's Way. It's just had its 30th anniversary. It's magical.
It's epic. I did a retreat with her a couple about maybe 6, 7
Did
years
you?
ago. It was awesome. Yeah, it was
I feel like you've like got connected with like all the who's who of we didn't even talk about your podcast. I'll just as a little side note, your podcast, the Youest-You podcast. Man, Mel Robbins, Marianne Williamson, Dr. Martha Beck, whom I love. Oh my
I
God, I
love
love
her
her.
too. Me too.
Tara Brock, and there, some dudes too, but
Yeah.
these are like, and all the marketing people, Marie Forleo and Jenna Kutcher, like all the, your podcast is amazing. So it's so great that you're so connected to
Thank
all
you.
these amazing teachers. But I did want to talk about the money thing because when you and I had our little pre-chat, you're like, oh, I have this intuition. We should talk about money. And it was like the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I was like, this is the year I'm going to figure out what my deal is with money. Like, it's my entire life. I've been like, I've always had three jobs, a little workaholism thrown in there for good measure. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, as a Silicon Valley executive making a bunch of money. And it didn't matter how much money I had,
Yep.
it was always messing with me in one way or another. Either it was tied to my self-worth or my achievements were tied. It feels like it was just like all one big jumble, like this giant knot of yarn that just needs to be unraveled. And you were like, let's talk about money. And I kind of went, it was so funny. I had a girlfriend who's been like, oh, you should go to DA, Debtors Anonymous. And I'm like, I don't have any debt. Like, I'm not resonating with that. Like, I'm not connecting with that at all. No credit card debt, not even a car payment. And then when you said it, I was like, absolutely yes, I'm gonna go. And then it just seems like the right person needs to say it to you. And then I found like Business Debtors Anonymous, which seemed a little more
Yeah.
a little more relatable to me. I left corporate about 4 years ago. I think maybe that's where I found you first. Did you have programs that are like leave your day job?
Oh, I'm sure I did. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
if I could do this, anybody can do this. I left my corporate day job 11, 10 years ago.
Was
Yeah.
that the nonprofit?
No, 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 no. So then I worked for Panera Bread for 11 years
Oh,
as
okay.
one of their largest franchise. I was their recruiter. I did guest relations. I
Wow.
wore two hats. I did a little bit of leadership training, and I mean, I helped them grow significantly. It was a lot that I liked about it. Isn't it ironic that I was working for a sugar
Oh,
company? Yeah. I was laughing. I was like,
flour and
really?
sugar.
I was like, higher
You
power,
were a
God,
drug
really?
dealer, is what you were.
Yeah, I was like, "You've gotta be kidding me. This is where I'm supposed to be working? Is this place with cookies?" But it did end up being it was a great job, and I liked it a lot. I think what happened is I started doing a lot of inner work and then had I when it wasn't a midlife crisis, probably a quarter life crisis or a time of just deep, deep, deep waking up, and did a lot of work and realized, oh, you know what? Like, this is fine, but I need to do something that moves me at a deep level. So anyhow, yeah, That
Yeah,
was
it was
the
out of alignment, and I really relate to that. I did corporate I was doing tech sales in Silicon Valley, so like network security and application development for like Adobe and HP and all that stuff.
wow.
It was so out of alignment with who I was that it was so painful. And I 2018, was, looking at, how to quit your day job type of stuff, right? It was super into it, like all the internet marketing stuff. I saw they had like Pat Flynn and just all these people that like I know all the people because I was like,
Yep.
how am I gonna I really believed, and I think I believed this even when I was a child, that money was gonna save me.
Mm.
Money was gonna save me from having to work with people I didn't like,
Yeah.
or it was going to give me the freedom to spend time the way I wanted to. Like I just had always seen it as my, but so I always had like some kind of side hustle going. And it has been the wall I've been banging my head against for as long as I can remember.
Mm.
And so I started going to these meetings and I found like UA, which Under Earners Anonymous, which really has hit home. And it was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. And then and I go to a meeting, I was like, these people are a bunch of losers.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I go, oh my God, I'm one of them. So it's like I have all this judgment. So I'm just really curious, money seems to be such a charged issue. And a lot of the people that are at these meetings are like long-term sobriety, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, money is one of those things that'll bring you to your knees. Like you must deal with this too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, goodness, well, you were going to ask me a question before
I'm just doing therapy right now.
I love it. I love it.
So,
I'm like, I'm with you though. No, it's one that
yeah.
probably 99% of people listening are going to relate to this topic, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I really wanted to bring some value to the listeners in the sense of messages like you are not alone and there are solutions and tools, right? I feel like
Absolutely.
money is such a like people have so much shame around money.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about like in UA, there's like symptoms of
Mm.
under earning.
Yeah, I'm less familiar with UA, but it's similar. It's
It's
similar
similar,
to
yeah.
BDA or DA. Look, I think the bottom line is, and I'll say this just for anyone who's like ears might perk. I also had uh, almost no debt. It was interesting. I remember thinking, huh, I don't really have a lot of debt, but what I was doing, there's a spectrum of the way that we deal with money. First of all, for many of us, there's something about money we think that our worthiness is tied to it. And
A
that is not
thousand
true.
percent.
It's not true. It's not true at all. That's part of the conditioning, right? And it is necessary to use it to survive, to thrive. And what I remember right away was, oh my God, there's this pattern. I started making a good amount of money in my business pretty soon after, and I had no business experience. I just really love what I'm doing and probably lucked out a little bit. And I don't know, my business had been growing and growing. And what I started to notice was this really awful pattern. I would make more and more money and I was making less and less myself. It really looked like that. So, hit six figures, hit multiple six figures. Now I'm like paying because I think I need to be in this mastermind or this program or this. The problem is when you can do that in a way that is grounded, great. But if you don't have the money to do it, and what I would do is say, okay, I'm just going to make it and then I'll pay it back, pay myself back. I'll pay it off. And it's a little bit of magical thinking. I did end up making the money, but I would be constantly paying for these programs. Now, they were helpful. I met great people. That's where I met Pat Flynn and others like that, for sure. However, what I was not doing was I was not paying myself. I was debting myself. So for me, I consider myself somebody who has to really watch that self-debting, and it's a thing.
Is like
It's
deprivation, like self-deprivation, denial, like denying yourself
yeah.
things or
It's more of the fear around money. So well, it comes from a lack mentality and a mindset. If we're
yeah.
going to look at it from kind of that thread of, scarcity and
Mhm.
mindset, I
Mhm.
believe it's a scarcity mindset that somehow there's not enough to pay for me. Well, if you're in business for yourself or you're in a business, you have to, I mean, and I get ebbs and flows, income and revenue does. But one of the first things that it says in both UA and BDA and DA is you pay yourself an ongoing salary. Like you pay yourself. It actually was very interesting. It talked about you pay your debts last. So it's a flip. It's like a lot of things in our world, I believe, are upside down,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They're upside down. So debt you pay last. So I had a little bit of credit card debt when I came in, just I hadn't paid that month. I always paid it off. And I worked with a sponsor who said, no, you're going to pay the minimum, and you're going to pay yourself and you're going to pay into your funds for vacation and you're going to make sure that spiritual things, you take care of yourself, you go to dinner with your husband, like you are not sacrificing your life for the debt. And I was like, what are you talking about? And the other piece was you get rid of all credit cards. So
That
for
was a
me,
shocker.
yeah, for the
I was like,
last,
what?
yeah, I know. You're like, huh? Here, let me
Huh,
hear it
wait,
again.
what?
Yeah.
But I'm getting travel miles. You're like,
Oh,
no, no,
yeah. Oh, I
let's
was
get rid of the
flying
card.
free and like first class. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was like, wait, what are you talking about? I have a really great situation here. And she's like, no, do you not trust the divine? It's what I call God. Do you not trust the divine to take care of you? And I'm like, I guess I don't. Because no, I really
Well, yeah.
do I trust my credit card more? But I will say it's been 4+ years. Um, the clarity, the transformation, the miracles, the change, I don't use credit cards and I run a business and I actually just paid myself today. And I was like, all right, I'm going to pay myself. Like it still can feel, and I love making money and I feel grateful about that. And it's resource and it's energy. And I love giving back. I love the giving and receiving, but there's a number when I see it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should pay myself right now. I need to keep a certain amount. It's scarcity, right? I need to keep that because I don't know if I'm going to have enough. So I want
Like a
that prudent.
prudent reserve.
Yeah. And I still have a prudent reserve, but it's again that scarcity, right? There's planning ahead, there's budgeting, but the whole premise is that it's a spiritual program. And that money is often looked at as we revere it, we put it on a pedestal. And it's the opposite. We want to put God or higher power or the divine or whatever you call it. That's my sponsor always says, Julie, your employer is God. That's who your employer is. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I know. I affirm it every day. It might sound silly, but I can tell you, it's been really beautiful, powerful, miraculous for me in my life, in my business. Is it perfect? No. I just, it's a whole different way of being. I'm very, very connected to how my money comes in, where it goes, where I spend it. I track it daily. It's like, I didn't learn any of this. I had a father that had major, major debt. He had PTSD, Vietnam veteran, depression, like we didn't know any of this. And he used it to try to feel better about himself. And so he went through
Mhm.
a lot of money, a lot of money. And my mom came from a lot of wealth and like could have cared less. And it was just very confusing. So I have
Yeah.
compassion for many of us. We weren't taught or we saw really bad or crazy behavior with money. But the thing that I think is the most important is to get that these patterns can change and that you are not the amount that's in your bank account. And I don't care if it's like 7 million or $7. You are not the 7 million or the $7. You
Right.
are not what your money is, either way or in between.
But do you think that how much money you allow yourself is a reflection of what you believe you're worth?
It's a good question. Like how much you pay yourself, you mean? Or how much?
Well, I mean, so, as I'm learning about the UA literature, they talk about fear of success, self-sabotage, procrastination, having a lack of vision. Like there's like a lot of
Oh,
conversation around, um,
right,
what is it? Vagueness
right.
and
Lack of
clarity.
clarity. Right.
And I've always thought that the outside is kind of a reflection of what we believe
Yeah.
we are worth.
Oh,
And so and I grew up with parents that were, my dad was of the Depression era. And so he was very tight with a buck. And my mom, she was, my parents divorced. My dad was a really good dad. Like he always paid his child support and all that. And he was available and all that. He was a good dad. But living with my mom, she immigrated from Mexico City,
Mm,
and she was raising us girls. She had like two jobs. She worked really hard, and so she was also very tight with a buck. And
mm,
so as an adult, it's like that lack sort
yeah.
of turned me into, it was like I was compensating. So
Yeah.
I'm buying BMWs and Louis Vuittons. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and using, and so, but now that I'm working for myself, it's like, am I allowing myself to make the money? Like I feel like it's all disconnected somehow, like it's
Yes.
tied to my self-worth.
Yeah. I mean, I love your question. I think underneath it, first of all, I think underneath everything is a spiritual answer. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to always be, what's reflected on the outside is a mirror of what's going on in the inside.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So like you can look at it and slice it a couple different ways. So, I've done a lot of different kinds of programs around manifestation and
Yeah, I love that stuff.
law of attraction. And I believe you become who you are, right? You become who you are, not just what you want, but who you're being. And for me, what's helped the most is to really get the spiritual. I just deeply into spiritual connection. So for me,
Mhm.
I tend to be on the flip side of like I'm not a procrastinator. I have the workaholism tendency
Yeah. Hmm.
big time. I mean, and I can hyper focus and keep going and keep going. And, I don't charge, I'm not an inexpensive coach. Like I've trained in it. I have a master's degree. I teach at Georgetown. I have my own certification program. I've been doing it for 15 years. Like I know coaching and
You
it's not,
were actually voted, sorry to interject here, but I have to say top 10 most influential life coaches in 2013. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, no, it was like, I'm grateful. Right. And
Right.
so I work
But
with a
you worked
handful.
for it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I work with a handful of private clients. I love it. It's miraculous. Like I do bring an intuition. And, and so for me to feel comfortable charging what I do today, I do have a sense of, I think, having paid for other coaches and other experiences. But I feel like, I feel that's worth it. I've seen the evidence of it. So in that way, and in the programs I offer, I feel really solid about it. What I have to, for me, the area to work on is first of all, not working all the time, which is my time is not just money, but it's your time to rest, rejuvenate, what all those things, but also to not put any of that money or success or any of that on a pedestal because that's not the goal. The goal is to be of service
Mhm.
and connecting most importantly with higher power, with a loving, intelligent power that for me, what I've been really focusing on is listen, how can I be a conduit, an emissary for this incredibly all powerful love that is created everything. That's a different way of looking at it. And then being able to receive, right? So paying myself, allowing that to come in, holding it, not just spending it right away, like really sitting with it. And the more work I've done around self love, around connecting to higher power, getting that money, it's an important thing. It's energy in motion, it's a type of energy. But that it's also not mine. I don't believe it's any of ours. I believe, we don't leave this world with like any money. We don't. We're souls that are infinite, is my
Mhm.
belief. And so something is shifting. And as it shifts, it's starting to like work on my mind and my beliefs about money. And it's taking the pedestals down. It's taking sure, I love lovely things. I have a whole vision of, my gosh, I just always have been very aesthetic focused. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Go on my vision board. It can be part of my vision. It's like making it right sized and not making that, my higher power, making God, the divine, something beyond anything we can try to understand in this world. That's what I That's what I really try to connect with. And then I've
Yeah.
noticed opportunities come, money comes. And when it might be, I know there was a month that last month was less than the month before. And it's like, it's okay. I'm solvent. I've not debted myself, and I'm making an impact, and I'm just not worried about it. And that's amazing. That's major shift.
That's so interesting because, I do study law of attraction and law of assumption and all these things. And there's something about like the neediness or
Yeah.
the grasping, the wanting that actually just perpetuates those experiences of needing and wanting.
Yeah. They're all rooted. It's just we live again in this, we were talking earlier, a third, 3D world of polarities. So
Yeah.
when you are in want and there's energy of feeling a lack, you're in lack. It's just what happens. It's the universe is going to respond to our energy and our feeling. So you can say the
Yeah.
words, that's not really the important part. It's like, are you saying what's matching? And if you can't do that,
Mm,
then find something else. For me, it helps me to go more general and to do and to affirm things like I honor my divinity. I honor my light in the world. I allow this greater potentiality, this greater love to flow through me, and I'm open to receiving through that. Those kinds of bigger statements, the like I am connected to this greater divine universe. And this might sound woo woo, but I'm going to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, I have a redefinition of woo. I call it wisdom of oneness, by the way.
oh, I like it. I'm good with woo. Like there's so much
Yeah.
science to support
There's don't.
spirituality now.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just go practice yourself and notice. I mean,
Yeah.
we're made of energy. We're
Run the
vibrating.
experiment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Run the experiment. So that's what I've seen. That's what I've noticed.
What do you think blocks people from receiving?
Well, I think there's a lot to that to answer that question. Number one, you said it, our family patterning. So if you had a parent or parents that said money don't grow doesn't grow in trees, or we're fighting over money, or I mean anything to do with any kind of micro traumas, even around money, and many of us have, or it could be religiously how you were raised, or you were taught like we never talk about money. So, like, the family conditioning, your upbringing has, I think, a huge part of your narrative
Huge.
for
Huge.
most of
Yeah.
us. And then I think I notice, I have not interviewed all women in the planet, but I think women tend to have more of an issue with with money blocks than men. Men can too, of course. I think for women, it's a bigger systemic thing around, especially those of us in the vintage year of like growing up in the 70s and 80s, and 90s, where
Shit, are we
nice.
vintage already?
Would you say? I
Are we
know.
vintage already? Damn
I know.
it.
It's a little, I know, a little sad.
It's true. It's true.
It's great. It's actually great because
It's
what's the
great.
alternative?
Yeah.
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 But, it like to be a certain way, to be nice, to be generous, to like, we just had a lot of conditioning that
Right.
was conflicting. It's like your foot on the gas and your foot on the brake. If you have those messages, and then worthiness, right? And then forget like, then you're seeing people that, you know, social media, and you're seeing these like beautiful photoshopped and these pictures that some are true, some are not, and
Right.
comparison and not feeling good in it. Like, it's a recipe for disaster for many people. I think it's
Yeah.
actually a wake up call right now for many of us, is the over focus on consumption and materialism. And it's just, to me, it feels so empty, because under
Yeah.
it, there is no real connection. You can have deep spiritual connection and have lovely and nice things and a Louis Vuitton bag. I'm not saying that, right? We want to find that depth of connection, of love, of feeling like I matter and I'm worthy. And
Yeah.
and then it's like, okay, those nice things don't define you. It's when they start to define you. It's when you think that's my worthiness. That's when I would say be very careful, because that's where I started doing wonky shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Spending can get a little crazy. Yeah. But
Yeah.
tell me about some of the tools that you've learned since you started doing a money program.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the first ideas that came to me, um, was it before? It might have been before I got into DA. It's so funny. I started having a very strong, I've always been very intuitive, always, but it really, really has grown over the last probably 14, 15 years, especially the last 10 years having a business. And I'm talking really in amazing ways. We all have access to this information, whether it's through what you hear or see or feel or sense. And I got this intuitive nudge to start a program called Sacred Money and to talk about money from a spiritual lens. And what was so funny is I read all these different books, and I was actually one of my mentors today. I love Barbara Stanny Houston. She wrote Overcoming.
Oh, yeah, that's what I've been listening to the last couple of days.
She's amazing. She's one of my closest friends and mentors now. I love
Ooh,
her.
girl, you gotta hook me up.
She's
Just made a
amazing.
podcast.
She's amazing, and she's steeped in she did have, I believe, a 12-step background, but she also has, Course in Miracles, and,
Yeah,
she went through her own bottom with money, and so Sacred Money, I was like, "I just wanna add the spirituality to it," and I was just
yeah.
asking, and that's right around when I found 12 Steps with Money, and
Mm,
so a lot of the tools are actually what I would have thought earlier, earlier in my days to be like, oh my God, these are not spiritual or fun. They actually are. One of the most important things is for me, it is tracking. It is tracking what comes in and what comes out. A very simple spreadsheet does not need to be fancy. But what we focus on expands. What we give love to loves us back. I really believe that. And so for me, like writing down every day and looking at my bank statements for my business and my personal, and I now know monthly occurrences, expenditures, the yearly, annual ones. I now track everything, what I'm making, what I'm paying myself, what I'm giving spiritually, all of it. And there's clarity. It's that word again. I'm not in
mm,
this like, I don't know. Cause in my house growing up, it was always like, no one had a clue. No one knew anything. I had no idea what money we had. My dad didn't know what money we had, which was a
that's
disaster.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
disaster. That's
S-
one of the most important tools is I think getting related and clarity and actually like shining some light and love on your numbers on the money on your money.
Yeah, just knowing like how much you're paying, how much you're
Yeah.
receiving. I kept so I was going to meetings and everyone's like, track your numbers. And I was like, it was like they were talking another language. I was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Because I just know that there's enough. I just kind of spend, my symptom is I'm friends with the Amazon drivers. It's like,
Oh,
they come
sister,
visit me. They come visit me all the time. I
trust
was like,
me.
is that a symptom? I don't know. But I started tracking. And as soon as I started tracking, I was like, oh, I started noticing things like subscriptions.
Yep.
Like I would sign up for a free trial for something and forget about it or not cancel. And then I would get billed annually for things. Like in my business, I was doing like a Riverside or like just all these different, oh my gosh, in business, you can have so many subscriptions.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things I was working with I love her, one of my favorite clients. We were doing this in her business, looking together. She's like, I think I'm just paying for things right now. So we looked at it, and I do this myself. I do use a lot of these subscriptions. I really do use them. But if I don't use them, you and I were talking about it. There's a
Mhm.
group that I was part of. It's a great group, but I'm not making the meetings. And it's not working for right now. So it's a couple $100 a month. Like it's not a huge amount, but those all add up.
They do.
Yeah, I had someone who was helping me with my social media with Instagram. I write it all, but she would help post it and organize it. And I just realized, you know what? It's not worth it right now. And she's wonderful, but I'm like, I will just post when I'm inspired. I do have my podcast post, but like, that's what it is. So getting really clear and then not making it mean anything, like not taking it personally or making it mean like, oh no, I'm not doing well in business if that's happening. No, actually, that might be the most kind thing you can do for you and your business. Be
Yeah, I think things like social media to promote your business, like for me, I found it really frustrating. But, as I'm learning in UA, it's like if you don't have a plan, like one of the, some of the symptoms, it's like not really having a business strategy, not having a business plan, not executing consistently. Like
yeah.
these are all signs that something is amiss. But, social media is something that sort of has been like the bane of my existence. And
Yeah.
it's just like you create all this content, you're trying to be helpful, but in the
Yeah.
back of my mind, it's like, how am I going to use this to support my business?
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, then I feel frustrated, then I quit, and then it's
Yeah.
a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. I'll be honest, I don't have an official business plan, but I do. And that is one of the symptoms is not having a vision, not having a clear vision, not having a
Yeah.
plan, um, procrastinating. So for me, I have a little hard time with a plan. I have a vision though, and I have things that I do consistently every week and like my podcast, like my coaching program. And so for me, it's been actually a little bit more around making sure I'm taking time off or taking time away and
Yeah.
allowing myself rest and time, like not being married. Cause I love what I'm doing and it can be all consuming. Actually, I recreated my business as an S corp because it's legally not me. Like before, it felt so connected. Right now, I have to pay myself a salary. I thought that's going to be a good thing for me to do.
Oh, interesting.
So to differentiate, so for some listening, that might be, I'm not suggesting you do that. You'd want to talk to your tax accountant, but I think having a vision is a good tool, like really getting somebody that maybe you can, bounce your ideas off of and writing it out, or it doesn't have to be written out. You could do a vision board. I mean, old school, like, but having something that gets your vision. And look, my visions have changed and been grander. They've been more granular sometimes, but just having a vision, like for me right now, it's easier for me to have a vision that's 3 to 5 months ahead. I do have a sense of what I would love to see happen in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but that feels too big
Yeah.
right now. So I'm like, what about next month? What about the
Yeah.
month after? Why don't we like reel it in a little bit?
Get a yeah,
Yeah.
bring it a little closer because
Yeah.
there is something to be said for allowing things to unfold
Yeah.
in real time, allowing God to work in your life in real time.
That's exactly it. I just wrote this the other day. I woke up and I was like, my only goal today is just to feel the absolute love and worthiness that's me and just follow this love. And that's it. And this guidance. I'm telling you, that took something. I kept trying to
Yeah.
take my will back. I need to do this. And the minute we start to get into, I got to figure it out. I really think that's where you
Ooh.
crossed over into ego, the edging greatness out,
And
edging that out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting that whole seeking guidance. And I think for a lot of people, it's like, how do I know what God's will is? And when we were chatting before, you had mentioned, that like your body knows, like, Bessel van der Kolk's, the body keeps us. There's wisdom in our body. And you
Yeah.
mentioned a tool that I thought was really interesting it was a pendulum. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I have it right over here. I actually
Do
just
you?
I I have a community and I just taught it yesterday how to use a pendulum, how to
Oh,
use a
nice.
pendulum and then how to use your body as a pendulum. Because here's the thing, like the answer is truly your body is not just it's more than it seems and it has the answer. What happens is our head, our mind often bypasses and we get into, does that make sense? Is that logical? Pros and cons. We actually, what I found is if we can switch it up a little and let the pros and cons and all of that come later and first see what your body feels. So a very easy way to do this is called the sway test. And when you can sit, it's probably a little easier when you're standing. Start by asking a yes or no question so you can tell most human beings, unless your energy is a little bit reversed, most of us, when we're yes, we're going to lean in. And when we're a no, we're going to lean away. And think about this. When you meet someone and you just feel connected, the instinct is like, I can
Lean
feel myself.
in.
Like, okay, lean in. And you meet someone or a situation that you're like, I don't think so. What do we do? We're like, get me out of here. I want to get away. So there's so much more I could say about that, but it really works. So this can help with answering questions that we're not sure about
Yeah.
around anything, money, our life, and just I like to put my hand on my heart, ask myself a question. I just did it this morning. I just did it this morning. I was like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. All right, and I was like, oh yeah, let me just see my body. My head said one thing, and my body 3 times said no.
And when you say that it says no, are you using the pendulum? or you're
So
just hand?
I'm doing both. I'm actually doing
Oh.
this morning. I was like lazy and I didn't want to come upstairs and grab my pendulum. But normally when I'm standing here, I ask a lot of questions right in my studio, and my pendulum is right over around the corner, and I use it all the time. I use it all the
And
time. You can,
it's a yes, no questions?
yeah. Here, I'll show you
Okay.
that we got a little show and tell. So it looks like this and has a little crystal.
Oh, yeah.
And
If
you
you're
hold,
listening to this on the podcast, you can also see this on YouTube.
yes, I'm going to be demoing, people have been dousing and using something very similar for hundreds and hundreds of years to
Right. Yeah.
figure out where to plant, where to garden and farm. So you ask to get a yes, and then you ask to get a no. And so usually, like yesterday, it went side to side for a yes, it went up and down for a no.
Okay.
And then I asked a question. It's funny, it was actually about making an amends to somebody that I was like, do I need to make an amends to the person? It was like, yes, 3 times.
Shoot.
Yes, you do. And then I asked, should I make it in this next week? And it was yes. Because then I said, should I make it today? It was no. Should I make it this week? So I'm like, so I use this all the time. It's been very, very helpful in developing my intuition, my faith, my trust in the collective higher intelligence that is around us that we cannot see. Most of us can't see with our naked eye. Doesn't mean it's not there. Doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not.
I thought it was so interesting because when I was pregnant, people would be like, oh, you should use the pendulum test. And I was like, well, what is that? And they're like, if you hold a yes in your mind, the pendulum will swing yes. If you hold no in your mind, it like changes directions. I was like, how is that even possible? I don't even remember if it worked to decide the sex of the baby, but it does make sense that like our body has the answers. It's like, I think we've all had that experience when we say yes when we really mean no, and
Yeah,
your whole body reacts.
absolutely.
It's like if someone asks me a question, I know it's a full body no, or if
Yeah.
it's a full body yes,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I try to make decisions. But I think it gets confusing when we think that we should do something, but our
Yes.
body is like, nope. I think
That,
that's when it gets confusing for me. So I think this will be a really interesting. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see. I'm going to play with it and see what happens.
yeah, play and have fun. The best thing I think anybody can do is to track it, to start looking in the past and see, when did I have an intuitive sense about something and I listened, and when did I not, and what happened. It's really best to be your own observer and experiment,
Yeah.
your own scientific, like, have that experiment mentality with yourself. But the truth is,
Yeah.
we get to choose how we're going to respond. But the mind and our brain is often coming from a fear-based place. And
Yeah.
that's the wiring often, right? To keep us safe. Understandable.
Negativity bias. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, exactly. And it doesn't mean that that's linked up with what's for your highest good. So I always say, show me what's for my highest good. I say it that way because I don't usually know in my brain. It needs to come from me. I like to give it to something much greater that can tell me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
My mother-in-law used to say, oh, pray for the highest and greatest good for all involved. I
exactly.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to
So
do it.
are you I want to make sure we, leave room for how people can get a hold of you, but is Sacred Money something that a new program that you're going to be doing in the near future? Or are you just
So
thinking about it?
funny. It's so funny. I already taught it. So it's one of my little courses. I haven't picked it up as much, but I do have my newest program is called Intuition School. We're starting
Nice.
in October, and the pendulum is one of many, 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 many tools that I'm going to be teaching that have really changed my life, that I feel like we all are walking around with, like, this is where I think, do you realize we're like $1 billion? We can't even put a price tag on your body apparatus. And we're walking
Right.
around with like GPS, treasure inside, all of the batteries included. And most of us got no manual and have no idea how to use it. And so that's what I'm going to be teaching as a framework to help people with their intuition, in addition to a coaching program later next year.
Oh, that's really exciting. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
I would say it's a great question, Arlene. I'd say the best place is it's probably my website, juliereisler.com. Or I do love YouTube. I have a robust channel with I always read the comments and I respond.
Nice.
But if they want to reach me, definitely through the website. And yeah, they can always reach me that way or email me, which is julie@juliereisler.com.
Awesome. Well, Julie, it's been such a pleasure to spend some time with you and to get to know you off camera as well. So I'm really grateful for your time. This is really interesting, and I'll be paying attention to the intuition school and all the things, especially the
Um,
podcast. Such a great podcast.
Thank you so much. And thank you. I think this conversation is so important. And, just to like break the ice, if there's any shame or anything that comes up around it, give yourself an extra hug and compassion because honestly, get that that is conditioning. We are not our
Yeah.
money. We're not our bank accounts. We're not our wallets. We are incredibly powerful, beautiful, divine beings. And money, I think the more we get that, the more money is going to actually reflect that.
Yeah.
But it's a byproduct. And so I'm just really grateful to you. I think this conversation is so important. I have actually not talked about it as much. It just hasn't come up, but I'm so grateful because I think this will be something that is helpful, I hope, and impactful. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's worried about money right now, so this is very timely. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Julie.